we bring you the unvarnished truth of law enforcement. This broadcast features unfiltered, unedited, and completely raw footage. Join us as we step onto the front lines of justice, providing a transparent view of the critical moments that shape our society.
Sir, you've been standing here too long. Step away.
I'm reading a Ranger memorial. This is a public museum.
People feel uncomfortable. Turn around.
On what grounds?
Failure to comply.
I am complying.
The museum was quiet in the way only sacred places are. Marble floors absorbed footsteps. Flags hung motionless from high ceilings. Glass cases held uniforms older than memory, pressed and perfect under soft white light. He stood in front of one display longer than most. A black man in modern army dress uniform. Ranger tabs stitched above his shoulder. Boots polished. Beret tucked neatly under his arm. His posture was instinctive, straight, without effort. Eyes steady as he read the plaque describing a unit lost decades before he was born. He did not touch the glass. He did not raise his voice. He did not move out of place. "Sir, you need to step away from the exhibit." The voice cut through the silence, too loud for the room. He turned slowly. "Yes, officer." The uniform seemed to register late. The officer's eyes moved over it quickly, then dismissed it just as fast. "We received a report. You've been standing here too long." Standing, the man repeated calmly, reading. The officer took a step closer. "You're making people uncomfortable. I need you to come with me." Around them, visitors froze. A couple stopped mid-step. A child tugged at his father's sleeve. Someone lowered a brochure. "I'm on leave," the man said. "I'm visiting the museum. This is a public space." The officer's hand hovered near his radio. "Do you have identification?" The man nodded once. "Yes, my military ID." He reached slowly, deliberately, narrating his movement without thinking about it. Habit drilled into muscle memory overseas. "I'm reaching into my jacket pocket." The officer did not nod back. "Hurry it up." The card was barely glanced at. "That doesn't tell me why you're here." "It tells you exactly why I'm here," the man replied. "I'm a United States Army Ranger, in uniform, visiting a national museum." The officer's jaw tightened. "Uniforms can be bought." A breath moved through the room, soft, collective. "Sir," the man said, voice still, "even if there's an issue, I'd like to know the specific reason I'm being detained." "No one said detained yet," the officer snapped. "Turn around." "For what reason?" the man asked. Failure to comply, with what someone whispered from behind. The officer reached for his cuffs. The sound was sharp in the quiet. Metal opening. Final. "You are under arrest," the officer said. The ranger did not resist. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He turned slowly, hands moving behind his back exactly as trained. The cuffs closed around his wrists. The click echoed against stone and glass and history. A woman gasped. A phone came up, then another. The man's eyes stayed forward. Not angry, not afraid, just stunned in a way that does not show on the face. He was led past flags, past medals, past names carved into walls for men who never came home. Still in uniform, in a museum built to honor service. "Do you agree with this content of Part 1? I will only continue when you confirm." Before the museum, before the cuffs, before the echo of boots on marble, his life had already been defined by discipline and restraint. Staff Sergeant Elijah Carter grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, in the long shadow of Fort Bragg. His father served 22 years in the Army. His mother worked nights at a hospital. Service was not abstract in their house. It was routine. Boots by the door, early mornings, quiet pride. Elijah enlisted at 18, not for escape, for purpose. Basic training stripped him down and rebuilt him. Ranger school nearly broke him. Cold, hunger, sleep deprivation. Weeks where failure was the default outcome and success was earned inch by inch. He learned to speak less, to move precisely, to absorb stress without reacting to it. He deployed twice. Once to Afghanistan, once to Syria. Missions he did not talk about, names he did not say out loud. Friends whose faces stayed with him long after the uniforms were folded away. The uniform mattered to him, not as authority, as responsibility. When he wore it, he represented more than himself. He represented those who could not come home. That was why he was in the museum that day. Elijah was on approved leave. 3 days. He had traveled alone. He wanted quiet. He wanted to stand in front of the history that shaped the oath he took at 19. He wanted to remember why he endured everything that came after. The plaque he had been reading described a Ranger unit lost in Vietnam. Names etched in metal. Ages younger than his. He stood there longer because he recognized the look in the black and white photographs. The same eyes, the same posture, the same calm before chaos. The officer who arrested him did not see any of that. Officer Michael Reeves had been assigned to museum security for 6 months. Low crime, high visibility, tourists, school groups. His evaluations praised attentiveness, assertiveness, maintaining order. There were complaints, too. 2 informal reports about aggressive questioning. 1 allegation of racial bias during a stop outside the museum. None sustained. No video. No witnesses willing to push it further. Reeves believed instincts mattered. He trusted the feeling that something was off. He had learned that hesitation made situations worse. Control kept things clean. When a visitor told him there was a man lingering too long by an exhibit, Reeves did not hear curiosity. He heard potential threat. When he saw a black man in military uniform standing still, he did not see service. He saw someone who did not fit his internal picture of a soldier at a museum. The uniform registered, then it was dismissed. In Reeves's mind, uniforms were symbols. Symbols could be copied. Authority had to be tested. When Elijah asked for a reason, Reeves heard challenge. When Elijah stayed calm, Reeves read defiance. Each measured response felt like pressure, and pressure demanded action. Around them, the room had shifted. Visitors were no longer passive observers of history. They were witnesses to something unfolding in real time. The quiet reverence of the museum now framed a confrontation that did not belong there. Elijah felt the change. The moment when professionalism stops protecting you. He had felt it before. On bases overseas. At checkpoints. In places where one wrong move could end everything. So he did what he had been trained to do. He complied. He turned. He placed his hands where ordered. He said nothing that could be misinterpreted. He let the process move forward, knowing that sometimes restraint is the only form of control you are allowed. As the cuffs closed, 2 systems collided. One built on service and sacrifice. One built on suspicion and unchecked authority. And neither would walk away unchanged. The cuffs were secure, not painfully tight, but final. Elijah felt the familiar pressure at his wrists and adjusted his balance instinctively. He did not tense. He did not look around. He fixed his eyes straight ahead and let his breathing slow. Officer Reeves guided him away from the exhibit. A hand at his elbow. Firm. Possessive. The kind of touch meant to signal control more than safety. Visitors stepped aside as they passed. Some did it automatically. Some hesitated, unsure why a man in full army uniform was being led away like a threat. A woman whispered, "He's a soldier." A man shook his head slowly. A phone appeared above a brochure rack, camera already rolling. Elijah heard the murmurs but did not respond. Years of training had taught him the danger of speaking when authority is already committed to a decision. Words could be twisted. Silence could not. Reeves felt the eyes on him now. He felt the weight of the room shift. The calm reverence of the museum had turned into something else. Scrutiny. "Keep moving," Reeves said louder than necessary. They approached the wide corridor leading toward the security office. Glass walls reflected their movement. In every reflection, the same image repeated. A black army ranger in cuffs. A police officer walking half a step behind him. Another officer fell into step from the side. "What's the issue?" he asked quietly. Reeves did not slow down. Suspicious behavior. Refused to comply. Refused to do what the second officer asked. Reeves did not answer. He tightened his grip instead. Behind them, a small cluster of visitors followed at a distance. Not interfering, just close enough to see. Just close enough to hear. "Sir?" one of them said, trying to keep their voice respectful. "What did he do?" Reeves stopped abruptly and turned. "Everyone needs to step back." No one moved closer. No one moved away either. Elijah felt it then. The subtle change in the air, when authority senses it, is no longer alone. He knew that feeling. He had seen it at checkpoints overseas when locals gathered and watched. When every action became evidence, Officer Elijah said calmly, "I am not resisting. I am complying with all commands." Reeves snapped his head toward him. "You don't get to talk right now." The words echoed harder than intended. A man near the wall exhaled sharply. A woman whispered, "This is wrong." The second officer looked at Elijah more closely now. The uniform, the ranger tab, the name tape. Carter. He leaned in slightly. "Sir, are you active duty?" "Yes," Elijah replied. "On leave?" "Yes." The second officer straightened. He looked at Reeves. "Maybe we should slow this down. Call a supervisor." Reeves shook his head. "Not necessary." They resumed walking. The security office door came into view. Thick, solid. A place designed to end public scrutiny, to move situations out of sight. As they reached it, a phone camera caught one last clear shot. Elijah in uniform, hands cuffed behind his back, jaw set, eyes forward. That image would travel farther than anyone in that hallway understood. Inside, the door closed. The sound was heavy, muting the museum behind them, muting the flags, muting the history. Outside, the crowd remained, quiet, confused, watching the door where a man who served his country had disappeared. The security room was smaller than the hallway suggested. White walls, a metal bench bolted to the floor, a desk with a monitor angled away from the door. The air felt compressed as if sound itself had nowhere to go. Elijah stood where Reeves positioned him, hands cuffed behind his back, boots square on the tile. He waited. Still. Controlled. "Turn around and face the wall," Reeves said. Elijah complied without comment. He stared at a blank surface inches from his face. He could see his own reflection faintly in the polished paint. Uniform crisp. Ranger tab still visible at the edge of his vision. "This is unnecessary," the second officer said quietly. Reeves ignored him. "You are being detained for investigation." "Investigation into what?" Elijah asked. Reeves stepped closer. "You failed to follow instructions in a secure federal building." Elijah nodded once. "I followed every instruction given." Reeves reached for the cuffs again, adjusting them higher tighter. The metal pressed into bone. Not crushing, intentional. A phone buzzed on the desk. The second officer glanced at the screen. He hesitated. "Sir," he said to Elijah, "what unit are you with?" 75th Ranger Regiment. The words landed heavier than Elijah intended, not because of pride, because of fact. The second officer straightened fully now. He looked at Reeves again. "We need a supervisor." Reeves turned sharply. "I said not necessary." The door opened anyway. A sergeant stepped in, older, slower, eyes already scanning the room. He took in the cuffs, the uniform, the posture. He paused longer than expected. "Why is he restrained?" the sergeant asked. "Suspicious behavior," Reeves said. "Non-compliance." The sergeant looked at Elijah. "Sir, what happened?" Elijah answered plainly. "I was reading an exhibit. I was asked to move. I asked why. I provided military identification. I was arrested." The sergeant's jaw tightened slightly. He turned to Reeves. "Did you verify his credentials?" Reeves hesitated. They could be fake. The sergeant stepped closer to Elijah. "Name and rank." "Staff Sergeant Elijah Carter." The sergeant looked at the uniform again. The insignia, the details that were hard to counterfeit if you knew what you were looking at. He exhaled slowly. "Remove the cuffs," he said. Reeves did not move. "Remove them," the sergeant repeated. The cuffs came off. Blood rushed back into Elijah's hands. He flexed his fingers once quietly. "You are not under arrest," the sergeant said. "You are being temporarily held while we verify information." Elijah met his eyes. "I was already arrested." The sergeant did not correct him. Outside the room, voices had gathered again. The door muffled them, but did not erase them. Phones were still recording, waiting. The sergeant turned to Reeves. "Step outside." Reeves left without a word. The sergeant lowered his voice. "Staff Sergeant, I apologize for this situation. We are making calls now." Elijah nodded. He did not thank him. He did not sit. He waited. In the hallway, a raised voice cut through the door. "This is going to federal." The words hung in the air, thin but sharp. Elijah understood then that the moment had passed the point of being handled quietly. The injustice had already happened, and it had witnesses. The verification took 7 minutes. 7 minutes of phone calls made behind a closed door. 7 minutes of keyboards clicking. 7 minutes where the museum returned to its quiet rhythm outside while the truth moved faster than protocol inside. The sergeant came back first. His posture had changed. Less authority, more caution. "Staff Sergeant Carter," he said, "your status has been confirmed." Elijah nodded once. He already knew. Behind him, a man in a suit entered the room. Museum Administration. Federal Liaison. His badge was clipped openly, deliberately. "This incident is no longer internal," the man said. "Because you are active duty Army, this has triggered federal review." The words landed cleanly. No drama, no anger, just consequence. The door opened again. Reeves stood outside, pale, now eyes unfocused. He did not step back in. The liaison looked at Elijah. "You are free to leave immediately. We will provide transportation if you prefer." Elijah shook his head. "I can walk." He stepped out into the hallway. The crowd was still there. Not loud. Waiting. Phones still raised. When they saw him uncuffed, a quiet ripple moved through them. Relief mixed with something heavier. Someone asked, "Are you okay?" Elijah stopped. He looked at them, at the cameras, at the museum walls lined with flags and names. "I am now," he said. That sentence traveled with the video. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. Not just the arrest, the uniform, the cuffs, the silence. Commentators paused the frame where the Ranger tab was visible and asked the same question again and again. How did this happen? At the precinct, Reeves sat in a small office with the blinds closed. Internal affairs had already arrived. His body camera footage was pulled, museum security video synced, witness statements logged. At Fort Bragg, Elijah's command was notified before he landed back at his hotel. Calls were made up the chain, not in anger, in disbelief. A ranger arrested in uniform, in a museum, without cause. The next morning, a federal investigator requested records from the department. Training manuals, complaint histories, prior incidents involving military personnel. The phrase federal consequences began appearing in internal emails. Reeves was placed on administrative leave by noon. His badge was collected quietly, his firearm secured, no announcement, no defense. Elijah released no statement. He returned to the museum once more before leaving the city. This time in civilian clothes, he stood in the same place, read the same plaque, finished it. The history on the wall did not change, but the system around it had been forced to look at itself. Do you agree with the content of Part 5? I will only continue when you confirm. The response did not unfold slowly. It accelerated. By the end of the week, the museum incident had crossed out of local control. The Department of Defense issued a formal inquiry request. Not a courtesy call. A request. The language was careful and cold. Unlawful detention of an active duty service member in uniform. Potential interference with federal service. Civil rights implications. That combination changed everything. Elijah was contacted by a federal civil rights attorney recommended through his command. The meeting lasted less than an hour. The facts did not require embellishment. The evidence did not require interpretation. You were arrested without probable cause, the attorney said. While on leave, in uniform, in a federal cultural institution. This is not just misconduct, this is jurisdictional failure. The lawsuit was filed in federal court. It named Officer Reeves individually. It named the department. It named supervisory failures. Claims included unlawful arrest violation of constitutional rights, racial discrimination, and interference with federal military service. The filing cited case law most city attorneys prefer never to see attached to their letterhead. Video from inside the museum was synchronized with body camera footage and witness recordings. The timeline was airtight. The moment Elijah complied. The moment he was cuffed. The moment credentials were dismissed. The moment authority doubled down instead of stopping. Public reaction shifted tone quickly. This was no longer framed as a bad stop. It was framed as an insult to the military. Veteran organizations spoke out. Active duty families shared the footage with disbelief. Former Rangers released statements that were brief and unforgiving. You do not handcuff one of ours for existing. Behind closed doors, the city moved to contain damage. The police chief called an emergency session. The mayor's office requested briefings every 12 hours. Outside counsel advised settlement before discovery exposed training failures and prior complaints. Officer Reeves was terminated for cause 3 weeks later. The letter was explicit. Failure to follow protocol. Unlawful arrest. Disregard of verified identification. Conduct bringing discredit upon the department. His appeal was denied without hearing. The department entered into a federal consent agreement. Mandatory training on military identification and jurisdictional limits. Revised policies for public institutions. Oversight for bias-related incidents involving federal personnel. Elijah's case settled quietly. The terms were sealed, but the consequences were not. Careers ended. Policies rewritten. A department reminded where its authority stopped. Elijah returned to duty without ceremony. No press conference, no victory tour. His commander addressed the unit once. This should not have happened. It did. Learn from it. Elijah said nothing. He put the uniform back on, not because of what it symbolized to others, but because of what it demanded of him. Discipline, restraint, integrity. The system did not change because it wanted to. It changed because it was forced to. What happened to Staff Sergeant Elijah Carter was not a misunderstanding of manners. It was a misunderstanding of law, authority, and limits. Police authority does not expand because suspicion feels justified. It contracts when facts do not support it. In public spaces, an officer may approach and ask questions. But the moment movement is restricted, the law requires reasonable suspicion tied to specific criminal behavior. Standing still. Reading. Wearing a uniform. None of these are crimes. Arresting an active duty service member in uniform carries additional legal weight. Federal law recognizes military status, federal jurisdiction, and the supremacy of federal authority in matters related to service. Local law enforcement does not have discretion to ignore verified military identification simply because it complicates control. Dismissing that status is not caution, it is negligence. There is also the First Amendment. Elijah did not disturb the peace. He did not disrupt operations. He exercised the right to exist quietly in a public institution. Courts have been clear. Silence is not suspicious. Calm is not defiance. Asking for a reason is not refusal. Bias enters where training ends. Psychologically, authority is most fragile when it is questioned without aggression. A calm person who knows their rights does not trigger fear. They trigger insecurity. When insecurity is paired with power, escalation often follows. Not because danger increases, but because control feels threatened. This case also exposes a dangerous assumption that symbols of service protect equally. They do not. A uniform does not neutralize bias. It only tests whether bias will override it. So what should people learn from this? If you are confronted by law enforcement, stay calm and ask one clear question. Am I being detained or am I free to go? That question matters legally. If detained, ask the reason. Do not argue emotionally. Do not fill silence with explanations that can be reframed later. If you are a bystander record, do not interfere physically. Narrate what you see. Calm documentation changes outcomes. History shows that clearly. If you are an officer, understand this. Authority is not measured by how quickly you can restrain someone. It is measured by how accurately you apply the law when restraint is unnecessary. Uniforms, credentials, and federal status are not challenges to your role. They are information you are obligated to respect. Elijah Carter did everything right. He complied. He stayed calm. He trusted the system even as it failed him. Accountability came not because the mistake was obvious, but because it was documented. Federal consequences followed because local discretion crossed a line it could not defend. Respect for service does not begin with words. It begins with restraint.
Seeking the truth is our ultimate mission. We dig deep to hold power to account, relying entirely on facts and data. Remember, the records never lie. Thank you for tuning in and supporting our work.